For Alan Purvis, life on the firm was far from a joke. He knew the sinister side of it all, knew how they set about persuading people to join them.
How was discipline maintained in the firm?
Well, discipline was maintained in various aspects. I myself was disciplined once.
How?
Well, as I say, through business and everything else. I was in my office and they come up to see me. According to Reggie, I wasn't doing things right and that the money wasn't coming in quick enough. I argued with him. Through the argument, I took a slap round the face and pushed into the chair.
Yes, you were slapped by Reggie?
Yes.
You're a big man. You can presumably look after yourself. What did you do?
Well, what could I do? I mean, I know bigger men than me that bow down to them.
If you were slapped by the twins, you didn't slap back?
Oh, nobody did.
Hello and welcome to another video. It's been a while since my last one, but here is another one. In this video we're going to talk about the violent side of the twins and some instances where the twins were very violent. Of course there is other sides to the twins, but the most prominent side to them is their violence. After all, they were gangsters and in the business of violence. It was and is just part of the game. Obviously the murders were acts of violence by the twins, but I won't be covering those here. I will try and talk about the not so much spoken about instances of the twins' violence, but will also mention some of the more well known ones. Both twins could be very violent, with Ronnie apparently being the most volatile and unpredictable of the two with his violence. And this was especially so if he had not been taking his medication for his mental illness. Reggie's violence is said to be more thought out and more reasonable, as in like he had to be given more of a reason to be violent with you.
Reggie was more businesslike, a bit more sensible, violent. Don't worry about that, he was a violent, vicious man, but it was more directed. There was more reason behind his violence. Where Ronnie done it for fun.
It is said you did have to be careful with what you said or how you came across with your words to either twin. Despite Ronnie being the more volatile, it has been said that you could also get a bashing from Reggie for the wrong words. If he felt you was talking down to him or if he was being patronising. One instance of this with Reggie was in the Green Dragon Club, which was situated in Green Dragon Yard, just off Whitechapel Road. The club was targeted by the twins for protection, and they were in there quite a bit, drinking and playing cards. A man named Bernard Shack, also known as Son of the Yank, he ran the Green Dragon along with a man named Bill Ackerman. Sonny the Yank referred to Reggie one evening as son. Quite a harmless comment one would think, and it is frequently used nowadays. Reggie took offence at this though and headbutted Sonny the Yank and also left him with a broken jaw. This incident shows that it was not only Ronnie that you had to watch your words around. One wrong word to Reggie could also command a bashing. The twins preferred an audience if possible. If they was handing out a beating, it does make sense why this would be. The more people available to watch, the more fear of the twins would grow amongst their peers. There never seemed to be any stage fright when it came to handing out a bashing in front of people, even if it was in a club full of people enjoying an evening out. One such incident is said about in Crazy Days, the book by firm associate Mickey Fawcett. It involved a fellow called Tony Lucraft. It was a full double R club with couples relaxing in the club enjoying an evening out. Ronnie Kray had not long been home from his stint at Long Grove Hospital, where he spent some time during a 3-year prison sentence. Reggie was not around that evening, so it was up to Ronnie to be the host for the evening. welcoming guests and checking that everything was satisfactory. Ronnie worked the whole room, picking out regular couples and thanking them for coming, adding, "I hope you have a pleasant evening." Completing a whole circuit of the club, Ronnie ended up back at the club's entrance where a Hoxton tough guy, Tony Lucraft, was perched on a low leather sofa next to the front door. Ronnie said politely, "Hello Tony, I didn't see you sitting there. I've got bad eyes, you know." With that, Tony Lucraft replied, "You must have effing bad eyes, Ron, as I've been sitting here for 20 minutes. On some nights this comment may not have bothered Ron. It is said you had to catch him at the right moment, and despite Ronnie being in a relaxed mood in the club, it turned out to be the wrong moment, as Ronnie smashed Tony Lucraft in the face and then proceeded to stamp on him. The barman and the door staff managed to drag Ronnie off of Tony, and then they ejected Tony Lucraft from the club. Mickey says that after this, Ronnie done another circuit of the club, still panting and sweating from the violence, apologising for the incident, saying it doesn't happen very often. This incident shows us that nowhere was really safe from the twins' violence. Even in a relaxed atmosphere of a packed double R club with couples enjoying their evening out, Ronnie still had no hesitation in giving out a beating. On another night, Ronnie Kray may have just laughed off the comment from Tony Lucraft. It is hard for us to know how that comment came across, how it was said, but I would assume it was possibly in a joking sense and not meant to be nasty. Ronnie though thought otherwise that evening, and I expect Tony chose his words more carefully when in conversation with Ronnie in the future. The most famous of Ronnie's violence was of course the branding of Lenny Hamilton at Esmeralda's Barn in the early 1960s. A fallout with the son of Buller Ward in a club one night put Lenny firmly in Ronnie's sights, as at the time Buller Ward was a good friend of the twins. The story has been recounted many times in books and documentaries by Lenny himself.
Went to Esmeralda's Barn in Knightsbridge. When I walked into a kitchen. Ronnie was standing opposite me as I walked in. And when he turned, that's when I see these, I called them pokers, but they were cold steels, what they sharpen knives on. You know, he had them on the gas. And I thought to myself, hey, he's trying to fight me, like, you know what I mean? Anyway, he come over with a poker, and he started burning my hair off. You know, I had thick curly hair then. And he come up to me and he just went, psh, like that, and then he put it across there. And then he took that poker back, and he went back and got another one off, and he held it across my eyes there. And I shut my eyes then. So he said, open your eyes, he's saying to me. I thought, so blimey. He said, now I'm going to burn your eyes out. Now all this is melted now. And someone at the back, they just shouted out, no Ron, not that. And he just, like that, switched off. He walked away. He said, right, you can go now. As if nothing had happened.
Once again, this was done in front of an audience at the barn, but only some members of the firm this time and not regular guests. Most of the violence was done in front of friends and firm members. I think the incident with Tony Lucraft at the Double R Club in front of normal punters was possibly a rare occurrence. Reggie Kray's most infamous act of violence, bar the Jack McVitie murder, was on Buller Ward himself. And this attack happened in the Regency Club in Stoke Newington, which was owned by the Barry brothers, John and Tony. The dispute was over Buller taking the side of a man who was out of favour with the twins, called Tony Mafia. For his trouble, Buller was set upon by some of the firm and had his face slashed by Reggie Kray.
Tony, give me some examples of the kind of violence that the Krays were involved in here.
Well, one night we was out, I came back from Stratford, it was my night off, and I'd been out with Mr. Clark, who's our doorman, and as we came into the foyer, they was arguing with a man who we know, and Reggie asked him one or two questions, and with that he's pulled out a flick knife and struck the man right across the face.
That man was Buller Ward.
Got to have about 30 stitches, 36 stitches, something like 32 stitches, I'm not quite sure. And that was it.
Why did one of the twins have to use a knife?
Well, I think it was because I don't know if they thought that I was a bit too much for one of them, because when he threw me these punches, I said to him, if that's the hardest you can hit, you'll have to do a lot better than that. And consequently, this is what happened.
Reg would get even more violent after his wife Francis's death in 1967. Reg would become more volatile and unpredictable, like his brother Ron. One of the earliest instances of Reggie's violence when he had established himself as a gangster was the shooting of would-be firm member Albert Donohue, and this happened after the branding of Lenny Hamilton by Ronnie Kray. At the time, Albert was a friend of Lenny's, and I think they went on bits of work together, as they were both aligned with the villain Harry Abrahams at the time. After hearing of Lenny's troubles at Esmeralda's barn at the hands of Ronnie, Albert was supposed to have said that if they had done it to him, he would have blown his head off, meaning Ronnie. This got back to the twins, and so Albert ended up getting shot in the leg by Reggie.
I walked up to the bar and stood there, said hello to a few people who I recognised, bought a drink, and I noticed people drifting away from me, left and right, and I knew something was going on. I turned around and Reggie's trying to cop an automatic pistol, if you don't mind. The next thing I know, bang, I'm shot in the leg.
I can't really think of any gun use by Reggie before this altercation with Albert Donohue, so this could be the first time Reggie had used the gun. Albert said that the gun was an automatic, and after Reggie had shot the gun, he was manually trying to cock it back. So this tells us Reggie was not really used to firing guns. It's possible he may have handled guns before this event, but it's highly likely that this was the first time he had used a gun. One of Ronnie's earliest documented uses of a gun was at a car lot owned by the twins' friend Johnny Hutton. I say friend of the twins, but I don't really know how much of a friend he was, but the car lot was under the twins' protection. Johnny Hutton had had some problems with a docker over a car sale. The car was not adequate for the docker, and he wanted his money back or else. Johnny Hutton stalled the docker until the next day, and then Hutton naturally had a word with Ronnie Kray about the matter, seeing as the twins were being paid protection. The next day when the docker arrived, he was very apologetic, realising that Johnny Hutton was not trying to rip him off and it was all a big misunderstanding. Unfortunately for the docker, it was all too late for Ronnie Kray to know about this change in events, and as Ronnie had been lying in wait for the docker and he saw him arrive at Hutton's office, Ronnie burst in holding a gun and shot the docker in the leg and then left. A clean-up operation was put into effect straight away, with Ronnie going into hiding and Reggie attending an identity parade in front of the injured docker at Marlin Hospital, and Reggie was identified as the shooter. But Reg, with his ID and an alibi from the twins' friend Tommy Redface Plumley, Reg was let go, and that was the end of that. This was Ronnie's first foray into using a gun. Like Reggie's shooting of Albert Donohue, I cannot recall any use of guns by the twins before these two incidents. Obviously, these two bits of gunplay by the twins would have done their reputation as serious up-and-coming villains the world of good. Not only did they have guns at their disposal, they were both very prepared to use them without question. Ronnie's use of the gun though was quite a while before Reggie got his first taste of it, with Ronnie's being around 1956 or 57 and Reggie shooting Albert Donohue around 1964. I can't recall any more gun use by the twins in those early years of the firm, but I'm sure they at least probably waved the firearm about at times. The next documented time of gun use involved Ronnie and a man called George Dixon, one of the Dixon brothers. The Dixons were from the Limehouse area, I believe, and they were very hard men by all accounts and long-time friends of the twins. I think the Dixons and the twins, it was a case of not stepping on each other's toes, seeing as they were both based in the East End. The Dixons worked for crooked pub and club owners, collecting some protection money from them. The story of Ron and George Dixon has been recounted many times by different people in books and documentaries. This one is from the joint manager of the Green Dragon Club, Bill Ackerman.
I was at the club speaking to George and Alan Dixon, and Ronnie happened to walk in. And I never seen him. Hello, Bill, and he stopped dead, went to his pocket, pulled out a Beretta, went up to Dixon, and Dixon was about 6'3". Ronnie was about as tall as me, I suppose, what, about 5'9", 5'10". Put the gun to his head and bang, bang, pulled the trigger twice, and nothing happened. I thought it was a joke. Ronnie took the 2 bullets out. He said, "Here's your birthday present, George."
But the story of this incident that I believe the most is the account given by Kray associate Mickey Fawcett in his book Crazy Days. The liberty that George Dixon was accused of taking concerned the Nashes. He'd had a disagreement with them and was now scared. He'd asked Ronnie to straighten it out for him. "Yeah, alright," said Ronnie, "just keep out the way and it'll be alright. I'll sort it out for you. Keep out the way, don't be about, don't put me in the middle and I'll sort it." He couldn't have been clearer, but then Dixon saw Charlie Kray and said, "You know, I had a bit of an argument with the Nashes," he said. "Has Ronnie done anything about it?" "I don't know," said Charlie. "Come down the Regency on Monday morning and I'll ask him." As George Dixon turned up at the Regency on the Monday morning, present were Nobby Clark, Johnny Davis, Mickey Fawcett, Freddie Foreman, Charlie Kray and the twins. Charlie wasn't to know that Ronnie had specifically told Dixon to keep a low profile. For his part, George hadn't thought to ask Charlie if he had warned Ronnie that he was coming. George Dixon had brought a mate with him. At first, Ronnie Kray showed no ill feeling, but after a while, Ronnie got up and walked out of the room. When Ronnie returned, he was running and had a gun in his hand. He stopped in front of George Dixon with the gun aimed at Dixon's head and fired twice, but the gun failed to go off. The trigger mechanism slipped repeatedly, and that was all that saved Dixon's life. Reggie and Freddie Foreman then wrestled Ronnie to the floor, and George Dixon left the Regency as fast as he could. George Dixon did later make it up with Ronnie, and Ronnie supposedly gave George Dixon the bullet as a present. The Dixon Brothers did try to fill the void after the Kray gang were mopped up in 1968 and sent to prison in 1969, but the Dixons themselves were mopped up by the police shortly after, possibly in the early 1970s. I don't really know too much about the Dixon Brothers, to be honest. I really only know of them through this incident with Ronnie, where George Dixon nearly lost his life in the Regency that day. There was almost another murder by the twins, or by Reggie to be exact. It involved a man called Bobby Cannon. This would have happened in 1967, towards the end of 1967. Bobby Cannon was a friend of Kray firm member Connie Whitehead and was enticed to a flat in Hackney for a drink. Present at the flat was Reggie Kray, Ronnie Hart, Albert Donohue and the soon to be murdered Jack the Hat McVitie. The intentions of Reggie that day seemed to be murder, as Reg and Ronnie Hart had wrapped towels around 2 guns to silence them, and then Reg and Ronnie Hart hid in the kitchen. According to Reg later, this was just a frightener and not a real murder attempt, and the crime that Bobby Cannon had committed to upset the twins was that he repeated an inaccurate story of the last moments of Frank Mitchell's life. As you know, Frank Mitchell was killed on the orders of the twins after the firm freed him from Dartmoor prison in December 1966. When members of the firm, including Jack McVitie, realised what was about to occur with Bobby Cannon, they really didn't want any part of it, and when Cannon turned up with Connie Whitehead, the members of the firm waved him away and then proceeded to chase him, deliberately knocking over furniture in the process. Reggie accepted that Bobby Cannon sussed out what was happening and had made a run for it. This could easily have been the twins' direct second murder that we know of, or third if we count George Dixon's lucky escape. If it wasn't for those members of the firm shooing Bobby Cannon away, I'm sure that it would have been a murder, despite Reggie saying it was just a frightener. Reg did go on to commit that second murder a few months later, when he stabbed Jack McVitie to death in the basement flat at 97 Evering Road in Stoke Newington. This failure of keeping Bobby Cannon in the flat that day may have gone against Jack McVitie and was probably another black mark in the twins' book against McVitie that eventually led to his murder. There was also the shooting of Nobby Clark by Reggie, which was more than likely in the early days of 1968 before the twins' arrest. Nobby Clark was a member of the firm.
Between 12 and 2 in the morning, Reggie was stinking drunk, and Ronnie kept going at him and saying, "Why don't you go over and get that little bastard? Go on, get a gun and go and shoot him." So we went over there. Nobby's coming down the stairs. And I said, "What are you doing this time of night? What do you want? What do you want? Can't you see me in the morning?" He never dreamt what was going to happen next. Reggie put the gun up to shoot his head off. I got a hold of Nobby and I punched him, and he fell down. Reggie shot him, but it ended up going in his foot or his leg.
As we know, by this time, Reggie was extremely volatile after the death of his wife Frances in June 1967. Reggie could arguably have been more dangerous than Ronnie at this point. Reg, it seemed, had almost given up on everything and did not really care what the future held for him. His future seemed to have died along with Frances. One of the twins' last acts of heavy violence was the attack on the Webb brothers at the Old Horns pub in Bethnal Green. This happened in the twins' last weeks as free men in 1968. The Webb brothers were earning good money and had their fingers in a few pies, with which the twins wanted a piece of, so a meeting was arranged at the Old Horns pub, which was run by the Berry brothers. As we know, the meeting didn't go as planned, and violence erupted after a comment by Billy Webb about Ronnie Kray being put in Longgrove Mental Institution. In Billy Webb's words, Ronnie Kray being nutted off. The Webbs were met with ferocious violence that day, with half of the firm being involved. Strangely, it is reported that Reggie Kray, while there, was not involved and was just an onlooker. The Webbs managed to escape with their lives that day, but Billy Webb later said that he blames this incident at the Old Horns in 1968 for his brother, Ronnie Webb's, early death some years later. He said his brother never really got over the attack and some of the injuries he suffered. It is claimed by Billy Webb that he later visited Ronnie Kray in Broadmoor and punched him. I've no idea if this is true or not. Other than Billy Webb, no one else really says it. Only Billy and Ronnie would have known this. I don't think it's documented anywhere else by anyone else. I can't really include all the twins' bits of violence here, as the video would end up being quite long, so this is just a selection of the twins' acts of violence over the years. Of course, the twins were not all about violence, and they had a more gentle side to them. It is easy to paint them as monsters because of their violence is the most prominent part of their lives in the public's mind. Ronnie, considered the most violent of the two, displayed lots of acts of kindness and empathy throughout his life, as probably did Reggie. In fact, Reggie Kray gave a £100 donation to the Aberfan disaster, which happened in October 1966 in Wales. The donation by Reggie was also on the behalf of his brother Ron, and it was the largest donation received. £100 was a lot of money in them days. It is very easy to overlook any good that the Kray twins done, as unfortunately for them, they will mainly be remembered for the murders they committed and their acts of violence, rather than any of the good that they did in their lives. I suppose that is the pitfalls of being a villain, and especially villains that are murderers. Violence was just a way of life for the twins, and they dished it out as easy as giving out birthday cards. Reggie Kray on his deathbed did say that he regretted being a bit too violent, but only in some cases.
It's very difficult to apologise in some cases, but not in others. But I suppose if I've been a bit too violent over the years, I will make some apology about it, but there's little I can do about it now. So again, it's no good reflecting back. It's pointless, negative.
Ronnie, I think, probably didn't regret any of the violent acts he committed, but we have to remember that Ronnie suffered a very severe mental illness throughout his life, and that also made him paranoid. As I have said in a previous video, the main fear of violence from the Kray firm was from the twins themselves. This is not to say that the other members of the firm were not very violent, because some of them were, just not on the scale of the twins. I have rarely read about other members of the firm being violent. It seems they were more likely to join in with the twins' violence than be independently violent themselves. Since my last video about Teddy Smith, I have been thinking more about Teddy, and along the lines that he was an MI5 informant. Teddy was there around the twins almost constant, then suddenly goes AWOL shortly before the big mop-up of the firm in 1968. Teddy was involved in pretty much everything bar the killing of George Cornell, that we know about anyway, and we know 100% there was an informant in the firm that was feeding stuff to the MI5 that wasn't Bobby Till, as he was given information to Scotland Yard, who probably didn't really know about the MI5 activity around the twins. We know that Nipper Read was kept in the dark over another informant from the American side called Alan Bruce Cooper. That came to light when Alan Bruce Cooper was arrested in May 1968, when his name was fingered by Paul Alvey, who was caught trying to bring explosives from Glasgow to London. The explosives were on order for the twins, who planned to blow up a club owner in London called George Coruna. Alan Bruce Cooper, when arrested by Nipper Read's team, spilled the beans that he was working for Chief Inspector John DeRose, who in turn was working under the American authorities to keep tabs on the twins' connections with the American Mafia in New York. Nipper was shocked by this revelation, so we can assume that Nipper Read would not know about any MI5 activity around the twins also. Teddy was around until at least 1972, as far as we can tell, before going off to Australia under his own name. Teddy would have been a wanted man by Scotland Yard after his disappearance, and leading up to the twins' trial, everyone was mopped up in those arrests. Even members that had left the firm a long time ago were arrested. Mickey Fawcett, who had left the firm sometime in 1966, according to him, he was arrested and appeared at Bow Street Magistrates Court in the pre-trial hearing in 1968 before being free to go with no charges to answer to. So they did literally arrest almost everyone, regardless of if they were still active in the firm or not. I do find it a bit hard to come to terms with Teddy Smith just disappearing and evading Scotland Yard's net, just vanishing supposedly up north and then to Australia in 1972. That's if the date of 1972 is correct. I did think that with Teddy being MI5, then why was he not produced at the trial? But then I think MI5's investigation maybe wasn't about the murders and the other villainy. I would say they were more interested in the twins' political connections, as they were watching the twins and Lord Boothby very closely after the Boothby affair in 1964, and as a recent report suggested, the MI5 called Boothby and Ronnie Kray hunters of young men. Teddy once again was at the centre of the Boothby scandal. Everything just seems to come back to Teddy. Teddy was always there. Teddy didn't get arrested in the arrests in the early summer in 1968. Then Teddy goes to Australia under his own name with all his correct details. Sure, after the twins' conviction there was probably no need to pursue anyone else. The main objective in 1968 by Scotland Yard was to get the twins off the streets. All the other convictions were just collateral damage. I don't think Scotland Yard were really worried about the other members of the firm. I'm not really going anywhere with this. I've just come to the conclusion in my own mind that Teddy Smith was an MI5 informant. It is interesting to think when Teddy would have been got at. I don't think he was planted by the MI5 in the late 1950s when he came on the scene. The twins were gaining a bigger reputation then, but I don't really see why MI5 would have got involved at that stage. So I feel Teddy would have been got at rather than planted. So we have to assume that if that was the case, then it would have been in 1963 or 64 when the Boothby affair happened. It is strange to think also that Teddy, being a bit of a writer, he never wrote a book detailing things. I know plenty of the firm have not written books, but out of everyone we could have expected one from Teddy, being the type of person we are told he was with his writing background. I think at this stage I am quite convinced that Teddy Smith was an MI5 informant. Quite a long video, I think, of me just rambling on, and I hope it's not been boring for those of you who are interested in this. Like always, I can't really offer you anything new to hear, but I hope it has been enjoyable. I would like to thank Steve Rafe at this point for allowing me to use some of the video footage used in this video. The footage is from a Kray documentary called The Name Is Kray, which is available at Bad Boy Books. The link to it will be in the description box under the video. It's highly recommended if you have not seen it. It is the original Kray documentary that was filmed in the summer of 1969 after the Kray trial. So if you're interested in seeing the full version, just head to the link under the video where you will find that very rare DVD plus other interesting stuff. So that's about it for me for now. I hope you've all enjoyed the video. Sorry it has been a bit of a wait for another video, but such is life. I can't say when the next video will be. At the moment it will just be as and when. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you again in the next one. Thank you.
One time was me and Ronnie and another fellow was coming down this lane, and Reggie and Big Pat and a couple of more just went galloping through the woods. But we took no notice. We came running down the lane. Very small ponies. And this is true, you might not believe it, it's true. We come down to the end, and then Big Pat and Reggie come tearing out on us on the horses. The horses wasn't running fast, but they was moving back and forwards. And Ronnie said, get away, you know, because he's frightened the horse. And Reggie said, go on, he's pushing his horse. So anyway, they had a few words off the horse. So he said, if you touch my horse, he said, I'm going to kick your horse. So Reggie got off his horse, threw it on the sitting there. I walked up and smashed and hit the horse on the chin, and the horse went down all fours, you know, fell. And as it fell, Ronnie walked off the horse. As it fell down, the horse ducked his head. Ronnie walked off of it and got hold of Reggie, started pulling the horse and making his horse gallop, you know.